Car Con Carne is sponsored by Sopel Solar, S-O-P-E-L, solar.com. Sopel as in Brent Sopel, former Chicago Blackhawk. He helped us win the Stanley Cup. He is going to help you win cost certainty for the first time ever. Get those panels on your roof. Right now as I'm recording, it's like 75 degrees in Chicago. It's freakishly warm for the end of October, but soon enough, it's going to be cold out. It's going to be snowy. It's going to be miserable. And you're not going to want to put panels on your roof at that point. Get them on now. No money out of pocket. Start saving the second they're installed. Take advantage of the tax credits that exist at the local and federal levels. Find out more. Get a consultation at sopelsolar.com.
It's Car Con Carne. Let's eat in the car. It's Car Con Carne. And now here's the star of our show, James Van Alstyne.
And I'm James Van Alstyne in front of Haymarket Pub and Brewery, 737 West Randolph in Chicago. I've done a bunch of episodes here at Haymarket through the years. Lots of reasons. First and foremost, the food's awesome. Also, the beer's awesome, but I can't drink that while I'm recording Car Con Carne. I love the vibe. I love the proximity to everything. It's West Loop, Randolph, and Halstead. Very easy to get to after work, which is what I did. I came straight from work. Hence the blazer and button down. When I got ready for work this morning, I thought, well, maybe I should bring a change of clothes. My guest tonight said that he would be dressing casual, but based on who he was, I kind of thought, well, maybe casual to him is different from what casual is to me. It's not. I'm overdressed. So between now and when I do the interview, I need to change out of the blazer and the button down, and I'll be asking my friends at Haymarket for a t-shirt, some swag that I can change into. I guess it works out for everybody. It works out for Haymarket for sure. All that said, my guest tonight is running for mayor of the city of Chicago. He is Paul Vallas. And I just want to say up front, because of the nature of what Car Con Carne is, it's me and a guest or guests sitting in a car, close quarters, congenial enough vibe, eating food. What you see may be perceived as an endorsement just because of the way the podcast is formatted. This is not an endorsement. This is an interview. I'll be talking to Paul about his run for mayor. He ran last time. He's running again in February for mayor of the city of Chicago. Not an endorsement. This is an interview that just happens to have food, delicious food, from Haymarket. They told me I was overdressed. I was wearing a blazer and a button-down.
You look fine, man.
Well, they made me wear a T-shirt. I think this was all part of their plan.
I think this is great. I look a little more respectable, but still casual.
You look respectable.
It's
you look
a good balance.
You look like someone who's running for the mayor of the city of Chicago. That's what you look like right now. All right, look at that. He is Paul Vallas. He's running for mayor of Chicago. He is the former CEO of Chicago Public Schools, former budget director for the city of Chicago. As a politician, he's run for governor. He's run for lieutenant governor with Pat Quinn. And he ran for mayor in 2019. On February 23rd, Mr. Vallas will again be on the ballot as Mayor Lori Lightfoot will be running for her second term. It is a typically crowded field with more likely to declare. Let's start with what people are saying about Paul Vallas right now. Paul Vallas. People are questioning whose camp you're in, who you're representing. They're calling you closet Republican.
Yeah, I know. Can you believe it?
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, Chicago Reader this summer said Paul Vallas rubs shoulders with the far right. The mayoral candidate spoke at a fundraiser for a group that has promoted transphobic rhetoric. That was the big one this summer.
Yeah. That was an interesting one. Actually, you know, the conference or the event was actually a fundraiser for Reverend Brooks' center that he was trying to build in his community. As you know, Reverend Brooks has been holding out on the rooftop of his building for the better part of a couple of years to raise the money needed to build his community center. He's been trying to fight violence in that community. So it was actually a fundraiser that I was invited to, and I was invited to participate on a panel to discuss school choice. So, you know, first of all, my support for Brooks and his efforts to raise money for the center and the invitation to talk about school choice was something that I did not want to pass out. So, you know, because one of the groups out there was a group that was, that that demonized LGBTQ advocates in the community. I kind of it was like guilt by association. But the bottom line is, I supported marriage equality, and when I ran for governor in 2001 and put domestic partners in all the city contracts, when I was city budget director, and when I was school chief as early as 1995. So I was about a decade ahead of everybody else. So at the end of the day, it's just people not wanting to talk about the issues. There are some conservative groups that support this idea that poor children should have the right to receive public support to go to parochial and private schools if their school is failing and if their school is more dangerous. And it's like guilt by association, because there are some conservative groups, and perhaps conservative groups that you might not want to be affiliated with because of their rhetoric. Somehow that demonizes the school choice issue. So look for those people who want to criticize advocates for what I think is the unfinished business of the American Civil Rights Movement, and that's the right for families to decide what school is best for their children. Look for them to continue to try to divert attention by claiming that advocates for school choice are somehow anti-LGBTQ. All the evidence to the contrary.
All right, I want to stay on the closet Republican track, but first, pizza.
All right.
Gentlemen,
Thank you.
2 pizzas? Are you kidding me?
delicious Haymarket pizza. We've got a 4-cheese blend right here. And then
4 cheese
we
blends?
also
Does that work
have
for you?
Great, yeah, that's fine.
one with pepperoni
Oh my
as well
God,
here. These
look
are
at that.
Detroit-style pies. There's some ranch dipping sauce, some chili oil.
Detroit-style pizzas from Haymarket. They're square cuts. They're pan, 4 cheese
Oh my
pepperoni.
God,
The
this is
crust
dangerous.
This is dangerous. And we're talking like serious mayor stuff,
We're in
too.
Pizza City here.
Yeah.
All I know is I'm glad you're not driving.
As a candidate for mayor of the city of Chicago, are you comfortable eating Detroit pizza on camera? That's a fair question.
I don't know about Detroit pizza, but you know what? Hey, it's free. I'll take it.
Now that sounds like Chicago to me. All right, let's stay on the closet Republican. The thought that you're a closet Republican. Most recently, you took a pretty hefty donation from a well-known GOP donor.
Yeah, who incidentally also gave money to three Democratic mayors, including Mayor Daley and Rahm Emanuel, and I think he also gave money to Bill Daley when he ran. So, if you're referring to Mike Kaiser, Mike Kaiser is a well-known supporter of charitable causes. Particularly, he's a big supporter of providing financial assistance, raising money to provide scholarships for poor families who are seeking better schools for their kids. And so, but he's been a strong supporter of Democratic candidates. So this is just consistent with his behavior, with his approach, which is to find the best candidate and support the best candidate regardless of their party affiliations. But I'm a lifelong Democrat. I went to work for the late great Senate President Phil Rock. I worked very closely with Dawn Clark Netsch. I staffed her committee, if Dawn, no one ever accused Dawn of being a Republican. Believe me, she was. As you know, I mean, I think I was marching in the. In the pride parades, when they called the parades by a different name, and when it was not politically popular to go, and I'm talking about 30 years ago or even longer. So at the end of the day, that's their only shtick. They don't want to debate me on the issue of what it's going to take to make sure that all Chicagoans live in safe and secure communities. They're not going to want to debate me on this issue of providing poor families with education alternatives so they're not being held hostage in their communities. They're not basically the prisoner of the quality of their schools being determined by both their income and their zip code. And they don't want to debate me on this tax and waste cycle that has the city spending $28 billion a year, because the mayor actually controls $28 billion in spending for a city population of under 2.8 million, but yet we can't seem to find the means to invest on the south and west side. We can't seem to find a way to freeze taxes. We can't avoid the constant increases in taxes and fees and fines. I mean, people don't realize that over the last really 4 years. This year included the mayor's city budget or the mayor-controlled school board have raised property taxes $871 million. They've been responsible for $871 million in property tax increases. And I mean, how much more can a city take? How much more can businesses take? How much more can working families? And how much more can the poor take? So at the end of the day, they don't want to talk about public safety. They don't want to talk about quality schools. They don't want to talk about financially responsible budgets. They want to talk about whether you're a Republican or whether one of your, fundraisers gave money to Republican candidates.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fair question. I think Chicago Democrats just want to make sure they're not putting a Trojan horse into office if they elect you in there. I think clearing the air is a helpful thing.
Yeah, but let me point out, and here I'm eating pizza already. Let me point out that it's a nonpartisan election, and I'm getting elected to represent everybody. I take a problem-solving approach to governing, and that means to identify problems and to find solutions. And whether they're Democratic solutions or Republican solutions, the objective is people need. Public safety is a human right. People need to have their human rights respected. School choice is a civil right. That civil right needs to be embraced and supported. We have an obligation to make communities affordable. So I'm a pragmatist in that I'm looking for solutions to address the problems that people have clearly identified as being the problems that keep them awake at night, that they struggle to deal with. I mean, look, we have a CTA where it's post-COVID now, and there's still 500,000 riders down, and the CTA president and the mayor would like to try to convince us that somehow this is an aftermath of COVID. Everything is blamed on COVID, as you know, and 500,000 fewer riders. The reason that there are 500,000 fewer riders is because on a per capita basis, they've had more violent crime than they've ever had in their history. And in fact, I think in the last 10 years, something like 32 people have been murdered on public transportation.
Well, I want to get to crime, but it seems strange to not say that COVID is responsible. Working from home, new hybrid working, isn't responsible for having an impact on public transportation.
Well, it's had an impact on public transportation, but the economy's been reopened for the better part of the year. To say that being 500,000 riders down, when I go to the red line, when I talk about riders, their big concern is crime. They don't see cops. They have unarmed security, minimum wage security, untrained security, basically, walking the platforms or basically at the CTA stations, who very often run away when there's a real fight or a threatening situation. Did you know that they're spending $100 million on private security? And I think it pays for 300 unarmed, minimum wage, poorly trained private security guards and 50 dogs, by the way. And think about this, 50 dogs, right? That $100 million could pay for 666 Chicago police officers. That means those officers on top of the officers that they already have, you would be able to put officers at every station. You would be able to put officers on every platform, and you would be able to have officers both in uniform and undercover riding the trains. Don't think for a second that if you did not have that type of a presence, and if the public transportation system became as safe as the airports, that you wouldn't see a significant increase in ridership. So those are the issues that I want to discuss. Those are the problems that I want to solve. So they don't want to address the problems. They don't want to talk about why we're spending so much on private security. They want to continue to try to claim that things are getting better when we know for a fact things are not. Rising crime, violent crime this year alone is up 37%.
And I want to get to crime, but I want to stay on the commuter issue for one moment. And there's plenty to talk about with crime. That's what everyone thinks of now when they think of Chicago. I work in the same building that houses the Ogilvy Transportation Center. Now, pre-pandemic, I remember just a crush of people coming off those platforms, going onto those platforms. you could have a pickup game of football now.
Yeah, you could.
Outside the Jamba Juice. What would you do as mayor to bring businesses and people back? Because I feel like it's in the rear view. We're living in a day of working from home, hybrid working. How do you get businesses and their people to come back downtown?
Well, look, certainly, we're entering kind of a brave new world, and post-COVID, things will never quite be the same. But when I was budget director, and then later school chief in the 1990s, when Daley first got elected, our strategy was how to populate the downtown, how to create almost like a city within a city. I mean, all these factors, Fulton Mark. I mean, you look at the downtown area. I mean, the downtown population was a fraction for what it was. So it wasn't only about making sure that you had a thriving and secure and dynamic downtown, but that you also basically populated downtown, so people were living and working and entertaining themselves and in the downtown year round, and that was our approach. But what's happened, and I think it's been primarily due to crime, is that it has it's doubled down on the negative impact caused by COVID, and it's delayed the return to people, to visitors. People don't realize how many visitors that the downtown would have from the suburbs, let alone tourists coming in to see Millennium Park and things like that. But people have stopped coming downtown, and more people have elected not to continue to live and work downtown, in part because of crime, because crime's out of control. Crime is definitely out of control downtown. Look, we just left. This place. Haymarket was robbed, or at least there was an attempted robbery. Look at what's happening in River North. Look at what was last weekend. There were 5 kidnappings in Wrigley Wrigley Field. Now they're kidnapping people, shaking them down, and then releasing them. I mean, it's crime is out of control, and so you've got to get a handle on public safety. If you're going to revitalize the downtown, and you've got to get a handle on public safety in the neighborhoods if you're going to create conditions in the poorest neighborhoods, if you're going to create conditions to get businesses to invest in those communities, and to slow the exodus of middle-class families from those communities. Do you realize that that when I graduated high school 50 years ago, 50% of the city was considered to be middle income. Today, 16% is considered to be middle income, and incidentally, that's pre-COVID. And it's probably much lower now post-COVID. And if you take out the city workers who are required to the city, the school district, the related agencies, city-controlled agency workers who are required to live in the city of Chicago, if you took them out of the equation, the middle class probably constitutes less than 10% of the city's population. That's devastating. A city can't grow with a vanishing middle class. And there's 2 primary reasons that the middle class is leaving. The first reason is violence. The second reason is the lack of quality schools. Over the last 20 years, the biggest exodus of middle-income families has been black families. In the last 20 years, well over 250,000 residents have left the city. Black residents have left the city of Chicago. They are overwhelmingly families with school-age children. So, and it's due to 2 reasons. It's due to crime, and it's due to the absence of quality school choices.
Well, here we are, Paul. Can I call you Paul? I should have asked you that earlier. Okay. Here we are, Paul. We're 2 older white guys. We're sitting in the West Loop. We're eating pizza that's been handed to us, and we're talking about crime in Chicago. Our experience is very different from people of color living in the city. People who are trying to bring home groceries on a block that's been overtaken by gangs. How do you, or how would you, as mayor, represent those people? How do you understand that experience?
Well, let's talk about policing first, and then we can talk about the other things that need to be done. So let's talk about policing. I'm a firm believer that policing should be community-based, which means the police officers should be pushed down to the local beat. Local commanders should have control of their officers, whether they're detectives and they're the various citywide units that provide support. I think the best policing is local policing, community-based policing, because you have to make sure that every single police beat is covered. Did you know that in some of the most violent communities, you'll go a night when maybe half the police beats have a squad car, half the police beats are being covered, because of not only the shortage of officers because they're not filling vacancies, but also their abandonment of the community policing strategy that the interim superintendent Beck had embraced, and superintendents like Terry Hilliard and others had advocated and had pushed for and had implemented years before. You had literally local districts being stripped of officers. So like in the 11th district, the most violent district in the city, meaning it's probably the most violent district in the country, there were 108 murders last year. You would, in a single police district, you would have nights when only half the beats were being covered. So what you've got to do is you've got to have beat integrity, because when you have community-based policing where you have cops on the beat and they're there every night, and those cops are known to the community, and the cops know the community, that is the foundation of community policing. So you've got to return to the concept of beat integrity, and absolutely critical. What you also have to do at the local level is you got to be supportive of initiatives like Alderman Beal in the Roseland community. He's done so much to revitalize the community where I was born and raised. The community where I built one of the really elite magnet schools, Gwendolyn Brooks, the old Mendel High School campus in Roseland. He introduced an initiative called, it was the Cop House or Mini Police Station program. Many of the aldermen would like to have these mini stations located in the strategic areas of the city as a way to enhance law enforcement. Why can't we have that? I mean, why can't we have a larger police presence, permanent presence in the community, with police who are dedicated to that community, are known to the community, and who in effect know the community, because it makes for more proactive, more effective local policing. And when there's that type of familiarity, that corrects a lot of problems. Second thing is, there's no strategy in place to protect witnesses and victims. Right now, there's no witness protection program.
Wait. It doesn't exist at all?
No, it doesn't exist at all. So in other words, if you're going to give testimony, and with the early release policies, or I should say the pretrial release policies of the current state's attorney and the judges, where they're releasing like 3 times the number of violent felons who are arrested and charged back into the community on like felony bail. I mean, in January 1st. They're going to eliminate no cash bail. Well, I mean, whether they eliminate it or not, you still have a fact that the vast majority of dangerous felons, of violent felons, or those who have been arrested for violent felonies, even individuals who have been the subject of multiple felonies, they're being released right back into the community. Do you know that there have been 86 individuals murdered or shot or this year alone, who were individuals who were released on felony bail? So when you have those type of practices, the inability to protect witnesses, the inability to protect victims, how do you expect the police to have any cooperation? How do you expect the police to get these witnesses to come and testify, because they're living in constant terror? So establishing a universal comprehensive witness protection program that can protect both witnesses and victims, and that includes really enacting legislation, or for that matter, even passing a city ordinance that basically says that if you threaten or intimidate a witness, or even come into contact with a witness, there are mandatory sentencing. There are going to be grave consequences. I mean, those are basic things that the city could do to help improve public safety in those neighborhoods. So you've got to return to community policing, and you've got to provide the means to protect witnesses and to protect victims in the process. What you also have to do in these communities is you have to recognize that the spike in crime that we've seen since 2019 is in large part due to the fact that we shut our schools down for 15 consecutive months. We literally put 330,000 kids on the street of Chicago for 15 consecutive months, and it had devastating consequences. Do you know that...
Did you think that the COVID shutdown was a bad idea?
Yes, it was, absolutely, with the schools, because other states did not shut down their schools, and there was no loss in academic performance. You didn't see huge spikes in youth violence. The archdiocese kept their schools open. You know, the NAEP scores, the national test scores, just came out. Devastating results from the NAEP scores. The academic performance of Chicago public schools on the state tests have plummeted, and they were pretty low before COVID. Before COVID, only 1 in 4 students and only 1 in 4 black students were meeting or exceeding state standards. Now those numbers are even lower. So it's had devastating consequences. But think of these statistics, right? Since COVID, there have been over 200 school-age youth murdered in the city of Chicago since COVID, including 46 this year. Ponder that for a second. 46 school-age youth murdered. Here's an even more frightening, an equally frightening statistic.
I feel like you're trying to scare us.
No, I'm just trying to explain to you, because I'm going to talk about a solution. I'm trying to identify the problem. If you want to know why crime spiked, then you've got to get at the underlying causes of crime. But if you want to know why they spiked during COVID, was because we degraded our police department. We didn't fill. We're like 1,700 officers down from when the mayor took office. We pulled the cops out of the local districts in these centralized shock and awe units. We pulled police from local police beats. So degrading the police department and basically shutting down the schools for 15 months had a devastating impact. Did you know that University of Chicago Crime Lab did a study last year that said 8% of the arrests for murders, 9% for shootings, 32% for robberies, 47% for carjackings were school-age youth, 17 years and younger. So,
devil's advocate, isn't that usually the case?
No, it's not. Not at all. It's not at all. But you know why those statistics skyrocketed? Well, it's because schools were closed. So what's the remedy? The remedy is you've got 625 school campuses in the city. Why are they closed at 4:30 in the afternoon? Why are they not open on the weekends to the community to offer community-based programs for the kids? Why are they closed during the holidays? Why are they only open half the summers?
Well, who pays for that?
Oh, the bottom line is, the schools are spending $30,000 a kid. When I ran the schools in 1990, and I came in, when I was budget director, you had almost 1,000 murders, and over a period of 6 or 7 years, that murder rate was cut by almost 60%. I opened the schools through the dinner hour. I opened the schools on the weekends. I opened the schools during the summer. I opened the school. Even when we had snow days, I still kept the school campuses open for kids who were home alone so that they would have some place to go. A lot of times parents can't take a snow day. So there's no reason why the schools can't get into the game and play their role in public safety. And when you say who's going to pay for them, if you open those school campuses and you invite these community groups and community organizations to bring their programs and to bring their grants to that school campus, you can offer an array of programs and you can give young people a safe and secure place to go. So it's just not about restoring community policing, embracing community policing, making sure that there's a cop on every beat, that there's a program to interact with the public to protect the witnesses and victims. But it's also about opening schools and making schools part of the solution. And right now they're not. They're sitting on the sidelines. They're not even taking steps to increase the instructional time to make up for what the students lost academically over the previous 15 months. So there are problems that have clear solutions, and the city just needs leadership to bring those solutions about.
Let's go back to community policing. How does that solve the problem where you have, again, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community who are scared of police, who don't trust police? I think there's been a fundamental lack of trust based on some pretty awful things.
Well, when you look at the consent decree surveys, the interesting thing is, and I looked at this survey that they did last year. The survey basically said that people in the community, the overwhelming majority of individuals in the community would not be afraid to come to the police officer with a concern, bring something to the police officer's attention, interact with the police officer. But almost the same majority felt that there wouldn't be any benefit from that, because in essence, the community, it was less about the community being afraid of the police than the community being afraid that the police can't protect them. So I think that's a larger issue. And if you have community-based policing and you have the proper oversight and accountability, that means you have the right sergeant ratios and the training officer ratios per new officers. If you have that infrastructure in place, then the community's going to get to know that local beat cop and that beat car, and those officers are going to get to know the community, because they're not going to be pulled out of their districts, repeatedly to go sit in their squad cars with lights flashing downtown or perhaps some other area of the city where there's been a spike in crime. So community policing and the proper oversight, the proper training, the proper supervision, and a program to aggressively protect and support witnesses that includes enhanced penalties for witness intimidation would go a long way towards improving the relationship between the police department and the community.
So I was on a work trip last month. I was flying back from California, and I was sitting in a row next to a couple, probably, I'm guessing, between 55, 65 years old. And they were reading the in-flight magazine, and they were reading it out loud, which was kind of annoying because I didn't have my headphones on. That's not the point. The wife was reading an article on the best tourist cities in America, or North America, and Chicago was on the list. And she said, Chicago, I bet the writer hasn't even been to Chicago recently. I think that person would be very surprised by what he sees. I came to learn later they're from Long Grove, and I think they'd be surprised if they actually set foot in Chicago. But how do you talked about community policing for addressing the issue of crime. How do you fight that perception? How do you let businesses, people around the world know, hey, Chicago isn't the land of Al Capone and gangbangers?
Well, if you can permit me to swallow for a second.
I'm trying to eat quickly because we have the problem with recording at Haymarket. I don't have a big enough car to hold all this stuff.
You did this. You put this pizza on my lap here.
I did.
This is temptation.
This is your mayoral challenge right here.
I just asked you for a cup of coffee, not a whole pizza. And how can I resist? Look, you can change things right away. Trust me. I mean, things have gotten significantly worse in the last 4 years. They weren't having these discussions 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So at the end of the day, they can get better just as fast as they got worse. I mean, clearly COVID did have an impact, but in many ways we made things far worse by the way we responded to COVID. You know, I laid out some very simple things that you can do to significantly restore the police so that they have the resources and support needed to be effective. And I laid out a real simple approach to getting the schools involved in the process too, because and that's what I did in Chicago in the 90s when I took responsibility for rebuilding schools in New Orleans, and I faced a student population that had been out of school for almost 2 years. Those schools were open 35-40% longer in terms of the instructional day and the instructional year than was mandated by the state, and we were able to keep the kids in safe and secure learning environments where they were provided with the additional education and support services that they would need to make up for the loss of learning time. And we also did something known as work study. So we actually created work study opportunities for high school kids. I mean, when I become mayor, I'm going to do universal work study. I'm going to get every city agency and every city department and every contractor who has a contract with the city, or for that matter, it's developers who are subsidized by the cities, and then incentivize businesses to create work study jobs for the kids. And then what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some of that $1 billion in COVID money that's been that has not been spent or committed yet, and I'm also going to use money by cannibalizing some of the irrelevant electives and courses that are offered by the schools, so that work study can be paid work study. So I can get thousands of high school students engaged in a work environment, surrounded by working men and women. I mean, wouldn't it be great if the kids, while they were also going to high school, were also in work-study jobs that would introduce them to the work world, surround them with the best role models in the community. That's working men and women, and also putting a few bucks in their pocket. I mean, that would make a difference, and all those things can be done. There are no financial obstacles to doing these things. It's simply a question of priority. It's how you prioritize and allocating your money in the ways that can have the greatest impact.
Staying on the police for one more moment. Watchdogs will tell you that there's not enough transparency coming from CPD. Do you agree with that?
There's not transparency coming from the mayor's office, because CPD is as transparent as the mayor wants them to be. When I become mayor, CPD will be 100% transparent.
We're talking tracking the use of force.
They're not, you have the University of Chicago Crime Lab. You have a lot of entities that working cooperatively with the police department have more than enough capacity and ability to basically track, to monitor the police. The consent decree oversight. It's City Hall. It's City Hall that doesn't release all the police statistics. It's City Hall that manipulates the police statistics. No greater example of that than the homicide rate. I mean, what City Hall tells you is that they have a record clearance. They're clearing a record number of homicide cases without telling you that they're counting all the cases they cleared, even cases that might be 6, 7, 8 years old, and then they're taking that number and they're applying that number against the number of murders committed in this year, the single year, so they can claim that they're clearing 60% of the cases. So they're misleading the public. And then they also go out and include in cleared cases where, because of a lack of witness or for whatever reason, the state's attorney elected not to prosecute. So they're not giving you numbers about arrests being made. They're giving you numbers of cases being effectively closed, even those where arrests were not made. In fact, this year, 50% of the closed cases did not result in arrest. So this is City Hall manipulating the data, because the mayor has like a stranglehold control over City Hall. What I would do with the police department is, now that they passed the ordinance creating the civilian oversight of the police department, so you have that civilian oversight entity, I would take COPA, existing COPA, civilian board, and the police board, and the and BIA and the other oversight entities, and I would consolidate them into a single entity that would be staffed by professionals, that would have police representation, but also would be governed by an ordinance that would require full transparency. And I would have that entity partner with other organizations out there to ensure that there was actual transparency. So the bottom line is, these problems emanate from this imperial mayor, and it didn't start with Lightfoot. I mean, she just is continuing a long tradition of the imperial mayor, where they have a stranglehold on information. They don't give enough information to the city council, to make informed decisions about the budget. We have those legendary cases like the parking meter deal or the Skyway deal, where the city council didn't have information.
Anyone from the area almost
they all
has
know
to
about
laugh.
that one.
Whether it's Mexfield, the parking meters,
because the mayor's office, it's like imperial Rome with a dysfunctional Roman Senate, and so at the end of the day, I mean, all the bad decisions that have adversely impacted the school, so probably over the last 50 years, have been the product of executive decisions made by the mayor's office and not ever being seriously challenged by the city council.
Let's talk a little bit about previous mayors. I mean, I remember, in the 90s, when Daley was running things, the conventional wisdom was, yeah, he's probably crooked, but he's our crook. That was always the kind of the attitude of the Chicago voter. And with that, I'll ask you, how much corruption exists in City Hall?
Well, look, I've never had an issue. I've never been called before a grand jury. I've never had like an expose or investigative story when it comes to the agencies that I've run, because I had certain standards that I adhere to. Let's just say that you don't have to have corruption in City Hall. People say that there's ingrained corruption. There's corruption when you let it happen. You need an executive that's going to set high standards. We ran the schools without controversy. I was city budget director without controversy. I then went on to become superintendent of schools in Philadelphia when the state took over those schools. And then I rebuilt an entire school system in New Orleans after Katrina, and yet we never had any controversies. We never had any investigations. We never had the feds knocking on our door. So you set a standard by the people you bring in, but you also set a standard by creating an environment in which you have 100% transparency, and that's what you need. There's enough ordinances on the books, and there's the infrastructure is in place to make sure that you have proper transparency. The problem is the mayor has veto power because, for example, the mayor can handcuff the inspector general. You saw what she did with Joe Ferguson, after 10 years, kind of literally forcing him out because she claimed she believes in term limits, and that was her excuse about threatening not to extend him. And it was because he was aggressive about doing his investigations. She is still sitting on reports that he did about the Anjanette Young controversy, or for that matter, the Hill Coal, the smokestack that they exploded, that they imploded, that sent environmental contamination throughout the little village community. I mean, that Inspector General's report has yet to be released. So really, the tone is set by the mayor. But what I will do when I'm mayor is I will move to strengthen accountability through ordinances and perhaps even through a city charter. The city really doesn't have a constitution. It needs to have a constitution. It needs to have a city charter. That's what
that sounds like a huge lift, getting that off the ground.
Yeah, but that's a lift that could be a 3 or 4 year lift. But what I will do is I will, for example, I'll move by ordinance to make the Inspector General truly independent of the mayor's office, and to get rid of the ordinance that in effect allows the law department to screen and to sign off the mayor's law department on what the Inspector General reports. I'll by ordinance create a truly independent budget office, city council budget office, with the power and the authority and the resources to really provide independent analyses. And I will move to make the city comptroller truly independent. And you can do that by ordinance. And if you do that, you're now going to have a free flow of information. You're now going to have much greater transparency. And with transparency comes accountability. And you're now going to equip the city council to more closely evaluate and assess what the mayor's proposing and what the city departments are doing, something that they do not have the capacity to do now. The key for the next mayor is to be willing to, almost to a certain extent, create a mechanism, so that he, in the case of myself, so I can be held accountable. So there's people with the information to monitor me and to give second opinions or to opine on the budget or to critique department programs, that there's truly independence. Now, eventually, trying to enact that or trying to create a city charter to institutionalize that will go a long way towards infusing in the city the type of a structure in place that would assure that there was much more honest government and much greater accountability. Eventually, a city charter can cement that. But I will move to do that by executive order and by ordinance because I'm not afraid to do that. One of the reasons that I was successful in New Orleans is I radically decentralized the system because I wanted 97% of the money minus school construction. I wanted that money to not be controlled by the central office. I wanted that money to flow to the schools, so the vast majority of the money would find its way into the classrooms. So the schools spent that additional money on a longer school day, a longer school year, providing more academic support, and other supportive services to students and their families. That's why the district led the state in enrollment for 7 consecutive years. So those are the things that I will do when I'm mayor.
All right, so the election is February 23rd. Last time around, you came in 9th. This time around, Lori Lightfoot is the incumbent, and as I mentioned, it's a crowded field. It's always like a battle royal. I mean, you've got a lot of people. What's different this time, Paul?
Well, what's different is the issues. 4 years ago, the election was about corruption, and Lori, being a former federal prosecutor, she stood out, and although if you talk to Joe Ferguson, the former Inspector General, and others, they think that she is probably the most that she's even more secretive than and less transparent than Rahm Emanuel and Mayor Daley. So now it's about crime. And now it's about the devastating damage done by the schools being closed for 15 months. And now it's about the fact that property taxes over the last 4 years have risen $876 million. I mean, so it's crime, and then it's schools, and then it's basically affordability. So I believe that residents are going to be looking for somebody who has the skills and the track record to tackle those 3 issues. Also, let me point out that last time there were like 14 of us in the race, and I think I raised $1 million because there were so many different candidates. You had Bill Daley in the race. You had a number of very prominent, big time heavy hitters who kind of consumed a lot of the funding, a lot of campaign financial support. I've already raised twice the amount of money I had last year, and within the next 60 days, I'll double that amount. So I have the money and the resources to basically, I think, prevail. And I believe that I have the solutions to address the issue of making sure that every community is safe, making sure that all parents, regardless of their income or zip code, have quality schools. And I certainly have the skills to get this budget in order so we can stop the never-ending tax and waste cycle that has characterized our budgets.
All right, I'm going to ask you the easiest question of the night, Paul Vallas.
Okay.
What do you love about Chicago?
It's diversity. It's neighborhoods. Chicago is almost in many ways a microcosm of the world, and its neighborhoods are its strength because they have their own identity. It's that cultural diversity. It's the city of neighborhoods, and I think that's what I like most about Chicago. I also think it's a city of unlimited potential. With global warming and the challenges that we face, our shores are the shores of the largest body of clean water, of fresh water, than unsalted water, and in the world with the Great Lakes. Our geographical location is dynamic. The fact that there are so many areas of the city that have been long neglected, that just with the proper investment and the proper prioritizing, the proper allocation of resources, it's someone really taking ownership of the need to prioritize redeveloping large areas of the city on the south and west side that have been neglected for decades. There's the potential there for significant growth, significant economic growth, significant growth in the city's population, significant growth, restoring and then growth of the city's middle class. So it's a great city. It's a dynamic city, and a city with all the resources needed to be effective. This is a city. The mayor controls $28 billion a year in probably the most perfectly geographically located city in the country, if not the world, surrounded by fresh water. The epicenter of transportation and commerce in the nation, and with those type of resources and assets, and perhaps one of the most diversified cities in the country, with those type of resources and assets, how can we go wrong? I mean, there is no reason why in short order we can't get the city back on track, and why we can't get the city, and why we can't once again become, really the jewel of the country, let alone the envy of the world. So this is the city that my immigrant Greek parents came to, that they set up shop, they set up homes, they opened their businesses, they educated their children. I mean, it's the city of my grandfather, it's the city of my father, it's the city of my children. So it'll be the city of my grandchildren. So I just think that that's what I love about Chicago. That's, my heart bleeds at what the city has had to go through, the ever-ending cycle of crime, the fact that we really regressed when it came to the schools. Having school campuses closed for 15 months, the fact that we continue to just pound working families and the poor with ever higher regressive property taxes and sales taxes and fines and fees. I mean, it's really depressing to see those things happen, but those things can easily be reversed, and that's why I'm running for mayor.
There it is. Paul Vallas, thank you for eating pizza and talking to me. It's kind of like a reality show. We're going to make you talk about your positions in the city, but you've got to eat a really crunchy focaccia crust pizza as you do it. I think you passed that test. You're able to do both at the same time.
How about you? What's yours?
I had to move it. I had it awkwardly sitting on my lap. I didn't know what to do. And so next time you eat pizza, you need to pledge to have some kind of tavern-style party cut. That's the real Chicago pizza, isn't it?
I love pizza, period.
I do too. Even bad pizza, I'll eat it. Eat it all.
And let's face it, except frozen pizza. I won't eat frozen pizza. My wife loves frozen pizza because when she was a police officer, her shifts, and of course she works at TSA, so I mean, she has like the weirdest shifts. Mm-hmm. So she's always eating on the fly, so she's always pulling out a frozen pizza. But she's a genetic marvel, so it doesn't seem to have affected her. But there are so many different pizzas in Chicago. I, though, am a deep dish pizza guy.
Okay.
The type where you can, like, 2 pieces and you can't have any more.
Well, says you.
No. But I'm a crust guy. I love crust. I love great crust. So this is really good crust here. So anyway, but thank you. Thank you for dinner.
That's the important question of the night. That's when voters are heading to the polls. How does Paul Vallas like his pizza? That's what they're going to be asking themselves.
Deep dish. But thick crust. Thick crust. The sausage and cheese. That's it. Don't mess around with anything else. That's my favorite pizza.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vallas.
My pleasure.